So we've been running these sessions for a little while. This is our session number 4. And it all kind of started with a commission that we got from Bethlehem Gallery, and they asked us to run a series of talkiokis, which in normal circumstances we would run live with real people around the real donut of a table, but there's exceptional circumstances, so we're doing it slightly differently, but that's fine. So we've done 3 sessions already, and we discussed all sorts of things relating to mental health, justice and creativity, and we had all sorts of people at the table, virtual table, from researchers, academics, artists, people with lived or professional interest in mental health or justice. So some of the conversations that were happening, they were very, very broad, very interesting as well. I would share some of the visualizations, and let me just see if I can do that quickly, because alongside every session we do our visualization. So sorry for the low-tech version of what's to come. Let me just see if I can share the screen. Oh, I can't share the screen because the host forbade me from it. Maybe they could do this for me.
Sorry.
But all in all, we had all sorts of conversations. So we're talking about labels and how they influence the way we think about mental health, and whether once you're labeled, can you ever be unlabeled? And we had some interesting views about maybe, instead of looking at mental health conditions as a way of stigmatizing people, we could really look at it with a different lens and think about people who are experiencing mental health problems as, quote, shamans of today, people who've got insight into maybe a different dimension. And shaman in itself is quite a loaded word in itself. So that's kind of where we went. What else we're talking about? We were talking about, what is it to recover from mental health? Do we need to rethink of what recovery is, or is it just, is it moving to a better healed state of mind and body, or is it acknowledging that this is how our life is, and as long as we're functional, as long as we kind of attain some degree of happiness, maybe that's enough. Maybe we don't have to be healthy or diagnosed sane. And diagnosis is something, again, what we're talking about, something that stays on the record for a long time and may influence the job prospects and things like that. We're talking about time as well, and how currently we've got a lot of time on our hands, and maybe it's a luxury, maybe some people don't have that time, and it's particularly in relation to mental health, sometimes time is just a pure luxury when you have to act really fast to prevent, to preserve somebody's life. There could be quite extreme cases. And it's worth mentioning, the reason why we're doing these talkiokis is to eventually come up with an idea of a proposal for an artwork that we can then somehow put together, perform, make, do, whatever it takes us. So here's a question to all of you as well, to kind of keep that in your mind. All these conversations at some point, we'll be asking you and ourselves to tie these conversations together and maybe come up with some ideas of what the final proposal could look like. Hello, new faces to the table. Hello. I'm just running through some of the themes that we covered in the previous sessions. So in terms of what the future proposal could look like, we're talking about maybe combining what the current world needs, which is maybe direct action and direct help in the form of, like, say, the NHS doctors are providing direct help and cure to people who need it. But maybe with the art, if we change the frame of reference slightly and don't think of the art as something that's exclusive, maybe not for me, maybe whatever, and we thought about as part of everybody's life, maybe we could start an art delivery to people's doorsteps, be it in time of crisis or maybe just as part of a normal life once the pandemic is over. What else did we talk about? Somebody said, I think it was you, Ariana, you said about taking ownership of lack of purpose in life. Can you have lack of purpose in life? And can you be okay with that? It's an interesting, I like that one. And also how everything is related to money, because of course it is. And some of the actions that that is being taken to help support people with mental health, or people who are within the justice system, maybe prisoners or people in wards in hospitals, how a lot of their access to the world or how they can express themselves is down to money and what funding is in place. We can have all these ideas, but essentially, if we don't shake the magic money tree, maybe not much will happen. What else were we talking about? We were talking about medicating the mental health, and maybe some pharmaceutical companies profiting from keeping the society insane, or overtly stimulated or fascinated by or maybe even sucked into this capitalist way of living, where you have to produce and you have to perform and you have to make money and be successful. That consequently causes a lot of stress and pressure, and the solution to that is more medication, more stimulation, and very little support, and survival of the fittest, maybe. Claire was working on the National Arts Service logo as well. So that's something that maybe we should all be doing, art national service. And what else? I'm gonna have to go back to the visualizations. I think that's more or less the same. Mikey, do you have anything else to add? Oh, we were also talking, I just remembered, we were also talking about audio tours of real life, audio tours of real life experiences. So maybe that's a new way of spending time, keeping yourself informed and entertained, if you can be entertained by some things. So there's that. And what else? I think that's pretty much most of it.
In the session anyway, and we're running a bit slow here, but Rick, I think if you want to go free form with your visuals, and just whenever something relevant comes up, just throw in some of those old visuals just to remind us where we've been already. Yeah, some of you that know Talkie and don't know this project, there is quite a run up. This is actually our 4th session, so we've got quite a lot of ideas on the table already, and we're dealing with those ideas. I think that was a great summary, Margot, of where we've got to so far. But this is the idea about this. This is a creative intervention. So we're trying to take some of those creative ideas and turn them into real ideas. And there's some really great ideas, like the National Arts Service, like this kind of audio tour to put you in the headspace of somebody with a different mental disposition to you, or the idea of Deliveroo for artists. These are some of the big ideas, but we've got this session, and then the next session we really want to finalize that idea and turn it into a proposal that we're actually going to do. Obviously, since we started this project, everything's changed. We're all in our own little rooms and our own cells, so that proposal could also take that into account and take that kind of just the current thinking. I mean, there's some people here I know that are new to all of this, so maybe it's time just to say hello to those people and maybe just get a thumbs up. Do you get where we are, what we're talking about? Does it all make sense? Any questions? Hello, Barbara. Nice to see you. We've got Rosa here.
Hi.
Hello. Hello. So everyone sort of like know where we are and understand where we are and where we're coming from on this one.
Yeah.
Good, good. And can you hear me? Because the sound.
Sometimes.
Yeah, we're struggling to hear you, Mikey. I think it's the several microphones maybe. But I join in slightly later, so I don't know. I missed probably quite a lot. So I don't know if someone can briefly introduce me to what you spoke about.
The thing with Talkioki is there's always a flow going on. So you always join. Very few people join in at the very beginning. So and we've got some more people coming in. So I mean, just basically just to say, this is about ideas for for an intervention into our mental health. There's some other people maybe that have been with us on previous sessions. Maybe you could say a bit about if you think there's anything we've missed here, or what your favorite ideas are as well, what you think we should be running with. Hello, Tracy, welcome. So anyone want to say Patrick, is that just a hello, or do you want to say what your favorite idea is so far?
So just to say, from a technical point of view, when you're not talking, you're muted. But if you do want to talk, do unmute yourself and do make use of chat. And of course, we are live on Facebook. If you just joined, then if you're happy with Facebook being broadcasted to the world of Facebook, do nothing. But if you want to switch off your camera, then that's fine. Over to you, Patrick.
Oh no, I was just saying hello to everyone. So far so good. So I just run with the flow, go with the flow.
Okay, so maybe let's go to some of the other sort of older participants. Well, more experienced participants, we should say. Oriana, is there any idea that you've heard, because you've been to a few of these sessions now, is there anything that you think, well, that's something we should be running with as an idea?
There were a lot of ideas that were probably worth running with, but it's like they were quite ambitious. So like the National Art Service. What?
The ambition level, because we can deal with that. It's not about, I think we should be thinking big and then we can scale it down. Yeah. I mean, we always do. Speak when we create a work of art, people want the Trevi fountain, they end up with a little pond.
Yeah. So there was the National Art Service, so the idea that there would be a publicly funded body of or a group of artists or that could provide creative mental health support in some way. And then the other idea that I liked from last week, which I don't think you mentioned it yet, which was the idea that everyone could have a label. I don't know, again, how do you implement that? Like everyone has to have a diagnosis rather, or several labels and diagnoses placed on them so that it wasn't anything that could be stigmatized.
Yeah, I mean, it's like this idea of a kind of overdose of labels, like give everybody at least 10 labels, regardless of what their mental health is. And then people have got, everyone kind of is happy with their labels, and labels is not such a bad thing. That was quite a nice idea. Jill, have you got anything that you thought was a good idea from the last session?
I think just to bring some sort of project so everybody can enjoy being artistic and creative.
Yeah. Okay. Well, any particular favorite project of the ones we've come up with so far?
Not really, sorry.
What about you, Claire?
I was just going to say, I was wondering in what kind of terms it was seen as ambitious. I mean, when I'm talking about a National Art Service, I'm not literally talking about setting one up. I'm just thinking about doing some painting, with slightly tongue-in-cheek about what it would look like. So doing a painting of a doctor's bag and all the implements, playing with the different things that a doctor might have and how they would be different if it was an artist doctor. So I'm a painter, so that's how I would bring it to life, is just visualizing things.
I mean, from my perspective, every idea has got to start with as an idea coming out of people's heads, hopefully coming out of more than one person's head. So I think, you know, even the most ambitious ideas, like the National Art Service, I think have got to start somewhere.
Can I just check? Was it Oriana? What did you mean by ambitious?
Well, I guess I was thinking of it as being like on par with the NHS, like being a kind of coalition of artists across the country. I don't know, providing services of some kind. Like I thought of it more of a socially engaged project where people were either, I don't know, like in one of, I just remember like in one class I was teaching, the students had the idea, oh, wouldn't it be great if every building had an art studio where everyone could go and be creative, whether they were an artist or not, like, or just like this kind of utopian, what if, yeah, what if we had, and so maybe the National Art Service would be providing those facilities in which people could come and make work, or they could go to people's homes and do projects within people's homes, or I don't know, just I thought of it as being more of a, yeah.
Can I just explain then? I wasn't thinking of it as in terms of a big national performance or actually setting up an NHS version at all. I was just thinking literally 2D paintings of what things might look like one or two just paintings that I personally would do. That was how I was thinking of it, and I started with the logo. So I'm very much thinking just of visual images, not literally going to every town and setting something. That would be crazy.
Could that vision grow into something a bit bigger?
Well, it depends how many people want to do it.
Okay.
I mean, I am not involved in performance art at all. Yeah. That would be like a 50-year project, and maybe in terms of months or weeks.
Okay, Patrick, you want to say something?
Yeah, I was going to refer to the idea of the pre-existing concept. So basically, based on my experiences with mental health institutions here in the UK, in the last, let's say, 5-6 years, back in the days, they had the most amazing system or network of art therapists existing on the premises, so in hospitals. And I remember my week would be filled with like pottery, painting, sculpting, music therapy, gardening. And so all that actually did exist, and maybe it wouldn't be a bad idea to maybe look into it and see how it works, because I think it was absolutely amazing until it all was scrapped because of the lack of money. So I think the idea of that sort of network being actually on a national scale is not completely ridiculous at all. I think it actually could happen, and it could exist, and I think it's much needed. So I think the word ambitious could be something quite encouraging, and I think we should think ambitious. We should think big, and then see whatever can be done in reality. But I think there's nothing wrong with actually thinking about something that could grow into even a national scale project.
Okay. Yeah. Would you be a member of the National Art Service?
Myself?
Well, I think I'm taking you as the first
patient.
I'm just asking.
I'd love to be.
Any other
mind?
The National Art Service. Have we got any other volunteers? We need volunteers straight away.
Plenty.
Oh, we've got a thumbs up here. Can you say a little bit about it? Hang on. I can't unmute you for some reason. There we go.
Yeah, that's nice. I'm very advocate of all the art services. I particularly like the idea of the gardening. because that's not normally considered an art thing, but I think it's a huge thing for mental health to be outside, which is probably quite a big topic of discussion considering the current situation.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a National Art Service is definitely an outdoor service, including gardening. Got a point here from Mariana.
Oh, I just wanted to say I have this little brochure here, which I got from the artist Lena Simic, who's based in Liverpool, but she did this workshop with other live artists, which I did not participate in, which is about how artists can live artists can become involved in politics. And they came up with this manifesto of a resident artist for every ward. So the ward is the smallest geographical area represented between 1 and 3 councillors. So the idea was that in each ward there would be a resident artist who could do
Right.
who would have a certain budget to do projects or in the community or whatever. And then anyway, it's kind of an interesting thing, and I feel like it sort of really relates to the idea of the National Art Service.
Each tiny area has got its own artist. Margot, you were going to say something?
I was just going to say about the time, because I think that just precisely what we were talking about earlier, like the time is luxury, but also there's this pressure to make things like now instantaneous. But I'm actually quite attracted by the idea of doing a project over 50 years. And sure, it may not be something that we will see, come to fruition during our lifetime, but equally, when you think about lifetime, is just like a fraction of like a bigger chunk that is time in itself. So yeah, I'd be up for doing a project that's 50, because it would move us away from self and, oh, I'm just going to express myself now, to thinking in kind of big terms.
More, in a way, cosmic view of art, of people, of the world, and we wouldn't be thinking so short term if we engage in a 50-year project.
Yeah, exactly. And I would just want to say about the raised hand symbol. If you hover over the bottom of your screen and you go to participants, I think it's the participants, then you can do a symbol of raised hand. So you can do a physical hand as well, but the other hand will allow us to see who raised their hand in which order. So we've got hand up from Tracy and hand up from Birte.
Especially when you've got a lot of people, it's really hard to know who's got their hand up. So the virtual hand.
I'm on it.
But you had your finger up, Tracy, before you had your hand up. So,
didn't have that finger up. I had that finger up. No, I was just thinking. I'm self-isolating. Not in London actually. Hold on a sec. I'm in Suffolk, and I'm unpacking boxes of my partner's family's stuff, and unpacked a box of his mother's diaries from 1955 to 2008. And you're talking about a long-term project, Margot, and it's something that it was an honor in that sense of like, she was sort of this white middle-class Christian woman, so it was a lot of like her prayer diary and her, the cooking she was going to do and all the everyday creativity stuff like the gardening and all the bits and pieces that she did. But a real sort of eye into the world of a person, but also of a time and a certain demographic, But it is, like you say, Margot, it's something that, one hit wonder, okay, but if everyone was not necessarily about themselves, their diary about themselves, but to do something that might become a pattern of creation over time. And I looked at these things and said, what do I do with these? What do we do with this living thing that appears to be not living anymore because a person's passed on, but it's got a creativity and a life of its own, this story of this person. Fascinating.
You short term, and we're just thinking of the instant of the moment, and what our understanding of the creative process is actually very short. And actually, should we be thinking in terms of years, decades, multiple decades?
Well, you plant a seed, you plant a tree. You don't expect to see it the next day. But we don't live in a culture like that. We want instant, you know, but back in the day, they did live in a culture more like that. They recognized time for what it was. But we like want everything perfect, find it all out right now. So
even in, you know, these times when we've actually, you know, we've been forced to isolate, has that actually allowed us to slow down? You've discovered kind of, you know, this more longer term practice? Is that what's going on? Are we actually slowing down right now? Anyway, let me just come to Birte. What's your point, Birte?
Hi. Just to let you know, I'm from Germany, and I try to get my brain into your discussion and what you were talking about and so on. And I just got the question, what do you want to do with that art project? Do you want to raise awareness in the public, or do you want that people with mental health issues are treated better, or differently, or more listened to, and that's kind of a question I have before I can actually think about projects. So maybe you have different ideas about that. So I need a guidance to what to think about.
Okay, well, I don't think this is so much about raising, it's not really a campaign to sort of raise awareness of the issues. It's more about how we can actually do things better, how we can help people with mental illness better, how we can just make a better life for improve everybody's mental health. It's not necessarily about, I mean, these discussions are about getting the discussion going, but the final project is a more positive distinction can we actually make. It's not necessarily about a campaign, it's not about ideas that will actually work and actually help. So I think that's a good question to ask, and that helps us narrow it down. Barbara, you're raising up your physical hand. Encourage you to try the virtual hand.
Hiya, can you hear me, everyone?
Yeah.
Thumbs up if you can hear me. Great. I'm coming a bit late to the discussion, but my name is Barbara. We actually met with Mikey years ago, maybe 15 years ago, through some Polish people that used to work for him, I think. And I'm kind of an artist, now kind of turning into filmmaker. And I experience in my personal life, you know, I have a mental health label, you know, linked with my traumas. And I also I've gone through justice system as well. So in order to try to get control over my past, etc. And the subject in general is quite interesting. Obviously, I'm not sure because it seems like it's quite loose conversation here, or maybe I'm joining late. But I think what Mikey, you were saying, the idea that how we can make things better for people with mental health. I think justice has got amazing power of basically person who is suffering, they have opportunity to gain control over, you know, what happened to them, which then can automatically influence the mental health. So in my belief in general, I'm interested in how justice can improve mental health. Because big thing for people who are suffering mental health is that beside things that happen to them, many times they struggle to have their voice heard. And sorry, can you hear me? I'm hearing myself double now. And what I wanted to say, and many times the other big thing for people who are suffering mental health is also, and I'm not saying everyone because we're all different and we all experience mental health in different ways. But I think for me, the main thing that justice can provide is the kind of a control that you can get over things that you didn't have control over, but also the kind of a concept that can finally be you know, find a voice, but also people can believe you finally, you know, so you can kind of move on and basically it's almost like you're getting a stamp on your past and you can leave it behind and move on. And it's kind of that's what justice for me is. But in general, justice is very messy and a very complicated system that is not supporting people so much, especially when you have mental health problems. You know, that means that is kind of an extra layer for you to deal with when you trying to get a justice, you know, in the court. Sorry, I'm getting
okay. No, that's whoa.
So, yeah, I mean, I also want to say that I kind of tried many different things in order to help myself and with my own mental health in order to move on. And also part of it was also, I work for advocacy charity in Hackney in my spare time, where basically I help on improving mental health system, working on commissioning for NHS and working on several working groups and tasks to improve the system that NHS provides for mental health patients. And as a part of it also, I did campaigning course. And there's so many marginalized people, so many people with mental health. There is such a big stigma surrounding mental health, but also justice. And many people don't speak about justice and how important it is and what impact it has on mental health. There's a lot of difficult conversation that haven't happened yet, I think. And kind of seeing the project, what you put together, I don't know, I need to look more closely into research and the website. But I think for me it's really interesting, you know, like this idea, like how combine mental health, justice, and then you're talking about some national art, what is it? National Art Service. I don't know.
We have actually...
Mikey, we're really struggling to hear you, I think.
Yeah, you're really breaking up.
Margaret, I need to reconfigure the cables, but I can't do that whilst hosting at the same time. So, Margaret, do you just want to take over for a second and I'm just going to reconfigure it?
Yeah, no, for sure. So I think it's interesting way. It's an interesting way that you were talking about it, Barbara, because you're talking about it in kind of, you know, compartmentalizing. There's this event, there's this intervention, it worked and didn't work anyway, but now you can see the parameters of it. It's maybe easier. I'm trying to paraphrase what you're saying because there was a lot of things that you were saying. And then you can look back and say, okay, so that was it. I'm moving on with my life and now I can instigate change. And I don't know how other people feel about that kind of way of thinking and how do people feel if they express themselves creatively, whether these two things, the kind of packaged way of thinking, and we're talking about the last session as well, that our brains, they kind of strive for just putting a label on something and moving on from it, but whether it's ever possible to you know, move the story along without having the compartments. So maybe it's not, I don't know. So if you've got any views on this, do raise your hand or on anything. But Barbara, I'm going to come to you. Just unmute yourself.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't want to sound like that. And I kind of, in general, I'm struggling because as we speak, I'm also experiencing mental health and these are called dissociations. So when I speak, sometimes I can go into the channels where there's a lot of things I've been speaking and I might be not making sense. But you know what you were saying, the kind of compartments and sections. I don't necessarily see it like that. I think that from my experience, I basically reach out or I tried everything I could to help myself. And I had to go through different stages. And for everyone will be different. But I think what I'm trying to say is that once we have this label or diagnose, or once we have this trauma, or justice as well, if we ever kind of try to get a justice, it's not like we kind of stop the journey and we put things in a box and we label it. It's like long-term work. And now what I'm interested in doing now is, through totally coming from different perspectives, taking photographs and doing 2D art, I basically started looking into the power of film and storytelling, and how I can put factual stories into film and basically show to the world of stories and voices that haven't been heard before. So, for instance, one of my things that I want to do in the future, and I try to get funding, etc., but the project is still like not happening, is I wanted to get women who tried to get justice in the court for different traumas that happened to them, rape, etc. I wanted to basically create the stories or series, TV series, where basically this issue could be addressed, but also I was interested in how we can portray these people experiencing this mental health or going through the justice, how they can be portrayed in more empowering way. How can we influence statistics? For me, it's not like I put things in a box and I label it. I didn't get the justice in the court, and I will have to fight for it the rest of my life now. So because of law limitation on historical cases, because of other stuff. And so my mission now in life is to basically just improve people, improve life or kind of experience of justice for other people, and how I can influence statistics, you know, how I can, you know, when you look at women getting justice in the court, 80%, 70% cases are not reported, 30% cases are reported, and I'm talking here about rape. 30% cases are reported, 8% gets to the court, 3% gets the justice, rest doesn't. So obviously the statistics, you know, just proves how porous the system is and non-supportive. So for me, it will be not like I will just kind of leave and put my experience in the box. I will be, every project from now on I will do will have the kind of elements either from my experiences or telling stories of other women or other people, you could say, with mental health or other experiences, you know? So that's
what I'm picking up from what you're saying, Barbara, and again, you're throwing up quite a lot of stuff, which is very interesting, and this conversation can go in any direction, but I'm kind of picking up from what you're saying that, you know, having your own experience and your own insight into whatever the issue is, gives you a power, kind of propels you to not put the problem behind you, but actually shine a light on it, and actually not look at people who are struggling with whatever this is that you're focusing on. Don't portray them as victims maybe necessarily, but actually retelling the story. But also there's a big burden of the big story that you kind of given or you've experienced, like the pack of letters that Tracy found in the home. And actually, before I come to you, Roisin, I just want to draw your attention to the visualizations table station. I don't know if you can see it very well, but one of the screens has got objects on it, and there's a kind of conversation happening with the objects, trying to visualize some of the things we're talking about, and it's done by our lovely artist Penny, who is moving these objects. So do tune into it now and then, and do let me know whether it's visible, whether there's anything there that stands out, because this is something completely new we're trying. So if you want to try that, feel free. But I'm going to go to Roisin, because you had your virtual hand for ages. Roisin?
Hello, hello.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I briefly want to talk about the labeling of when people have mental health issues, because I kind of hate it, because once it's done, it can never be undone. But in the terms of getting medical help and funding, it's essentially crucial. If you're at school and you want help, you have to be diagnosed with something. Without some kind of diagnosis, there is no funding and there's no support available to you. So I've always personally found that very difficult, because there's problems I've had in my own life. It felt if I had a diagnosis of something, I could get help. But if I have a diagnosis, it puts you in a box that you can never ever leave, and that itself worries me quite a lot. So right now, for example, you've got the nice visualizations, but I personally can't talk to this many people and look at visualization. I need to see your lips move when you talk. But that's not a disability as such, that's not a mental issue, but I can't talk to you if I can't see your face. So that's a whole different thing. There's so many things and so many things you have to take into account. And a label will help because people will understand what you need. But then the label will be a problem because it puts you in a box and they think you understand and you want certain things that you might not, I guess.
Back in the room, can you hear me? Can people hear? Hello, hello? Can you hear me?
Can you see those lips moving?
Can you see my lips? Exactly. Can you see my lips? Cool.
Roisin is giving
I've been
thumbs up.
listening, but it's been very frustrating because I've been trying to, intervene and say my bit, and it's probably a good experience about what it's like to not be properly heard. Hopefully people can hear me better now.
It's better now.
Yeah. Sorry about that. We've just been trying, because we've had some technical problems, we've just been trying a few different things. But
we had a
what I was going to say, yeah, I mean, I think the things that you were saying, Barbara, we've talked about a lot of these things, and a lot of these struggles have been actually the kind of meat of what we've been talking about in the previous 3 or 4 sessions, and how to overcome these things creatively. So it's great in a way to actually have your creative input and in a way join forces and try to get some of these things actually happening. So, absolutely crucial discussions. The question about labeling is a really crucial one amongst all these other questions, a question of justice as well, and a question of control. I mean, I think earlier on, I really wanted to pick up on this question of control because it's such an important thing to feel like you're in control. So there's all of these things. Going back to what Roisin said about the labeling, we were talking about this last week, that labeling could become a positive thing if everybody's got a label, and like if everyone's not just got one label but 10 labels each. So like for example, I'm a little bit ADD, I'm a little bit this, I'm a little bit that, and then but if everyone's got a label, then it doesn't matter. It becomes not a stigma, but just in a way a bit like a kind of horoscope we were saying, or a kind of just a framework to describe a person. So these are some of the interventions, some of the ideas. Sorry about the technical problems we've been having this week on this event, but we've also got a new face down the bottom. Hello, Chelsea. And I will try to keep the lips together with the voice, but we will also try and get some visuals in as well. So I hope you don't mind, Roisin. Claire, you had a point?
Oh, Claire, unmute yourself.
Hi, just to follow up on what Roisin was saying, there was a couple of things that I really agree with in terms of funding and support. Labels are helpful, but there are so many different spheres in life, daily life, and it's a choice whether you disclose to other places that isn't helpful for you. There's no obligation to disclose. I think the law's changed that you don't even have to disclose in an employment situation. That's obviously more complicated because if you do disclose, you may be able to use the Equality Act that used to be the Disability Discrimination Act. You may be able to bring that in. So, but it's also a question of timing. Do you say it before you've had an interview? Do you say it once you've got to know your line manager and proved you can do the job and it's worth them making reasonable adjustments? There's legally what will happen, and then there's practically what happens in the real world. So there's all this juggling. But just because a doctor has given you a label doesn't mean you have to announce it to every acquaintance or even family member that you think can't handle it. Because there's all kinds of technical medical language, not just to do with mental health, but things in general, like mathematical terms that mean something completely different in everyday life, like redundancy or backup. You know, these things just have different meanings, and people will use terms like manic depression in everyday life, and they don't really mean it in a medical way always, particularly if they're not in that environment. So that's one thing. But I mean, labels helps, it gets you help. But if you're already feeling not good, to put it another way, it can be not very nice for you to feel, for you to personally take on that label and to be able to separate it and just say it's just a means to an end. This is not how, you know, because if you're trying to,
it's like a double-edged sword, really, isn't it? It's like it's kind of like a power, but a very dangerous power, let's say. Patrick.
Yeah, I just wanted to continue in that vein. So basically, the whole label thing, it's very tricky. I think if we lived in a perfect society, in perfect conditions, it would be so much easier, when nobody would be judgmental and we could just be whoever we want to be without feeling the possibility of being judged or persecuted, even to a certain extent. Like, for example, me being gay, I can happily march in, you know, in the gay pride here in London or in Berlin, hand in hand with my partner. But I wouldn't do that in Poland, in my small, like, you know, there was a gay pride 50 kilometers away from my hometown, and I felt so torn, because on one hand I was like, this is my community. On the other hand, I knew there would be Mayim, and I was just worried and scared, and I didn't go. So I didn't really do that. Or like the mental health issue, like in certain jobs, I felt kind of open enough to share it with my employer. In others, I knew I won't be able to do because I'll lose my job. The thing with relationships, like that's something very tricky. In the end of the day, you have to share it with your partner, because that's not something you can conceal or hide. But would you say it on a first date? It's kind of tricky, you know. How I'm Patrick, I'm bipolar. It's a bit funny. Just leave it for like maybe a second or third date, etc., etc. So those labels can be, yeah, we all do have labels, but who picks the labels for us? Like you know, like who chooses them? Like,
well, in a way, it comes back to this question of control. That, you know, if you're going to have those labels, you need the control over the labels.
You have to feel really strongly about it. You have to feel really confident about the fact that you can own them, and it's fine. Like the other day, I had this amazing conversation in between between this meeting and the last one 2 weeks ago. It was out of the blue. This friend of mine called me, and she asked me that she's looking for a sperm donor for her child. And I told her, in like, just to cut the long story short, that, you know, I have a mental health condition that could possibly affect the child. And she was like, I don't think that's a problem. My only problem is the medication. If you can get off the meds for 2 months and clear your system, your body, I'm happy to go ahead. And so I felt so, like, it was such an amazing forward-thinking conversation, and it was so empowering that we can have this conversation as if it is the most normal thing ever. And I love the conversation. I don't know if they're going ahead or not, but I felt so wonderful that, you know, things like that can now happen, that people don't think in the box. They kind of can look out of the box, and that was quite powerful.
I mean, Patrick, this actually sort of tags into a conversation we were having last week in a different session, where we were talking about the new normal. Is this the new normal? Is this a new normal that we want? Where these kind of conversations are so much more comfortable. And
I mean, I give you another example about HIV. I mean, back in the 80s and 90s, it was it was such a humongous stigma. People were dying, like, you know, day after day. They were losing their friends, family. And since we have the medicine now, you know, there's PrEP and stuff. Like, it's I think the whole understanding of HIV and AIDS is so much different. I mean, it took about 30 years, let's say, but it did change. I mean, I'm not like comparing these things, but it's like a social phenomena that did happen, and it did change because of the circumstances, the access, the understanding, the exposure. I think I hope this will also change somehow.
Let me
But
bring
we need more exposure, maybe.
Let me bring in Rasheen because she's had a virtual hand up for a while.
Excuse me. Thank you.
Rasheen?
I was just saying, we're talking about ownership and control. And you can own things when you're well, when you're healthy, when you're feeling like you're the best you ever. But when you're not, it's a lot more difficult and you have to trust other people. And I don't want to trust them when I'm unwell. They're not, I don't think they're the same person that I know normally. You know, I don't know who to trust then. And it's very much about control, at least in my personal opinion. With any kind of mental illness, that's all it's about. Because as soon as you're unwell, you have to trust other people and then they have control. And that is terrifying. And if you label yourself, you'll never get the control back in a way. People will always be like, well, you know, are you okay now? You can never get it back. And that's scary. Like I don't have any diagnosed anything, but I've had episodes in my life. And in my job, when I see that happening, I have to make a choice if I tell them or if I don't. And if I tell them, I can never untell them ever again.
So
it's
true.
Not
like just the control of the moment, it's the control in the future. And the future situation, what's that going to be? How does this give us more or less control in the future as well? Patrick, I'm just going to hang on a sec because I just want to bring in Piotr. That's not said anything yet. So welcome to the session. Also, before I bring you in, Piotr, I just want to say you're getting good props, Barbara, on the Facebook stream. Abby is liking what you're saying, Barbara. If you're still listening, I do hope you are. Anyway, Piotr, what have you got to say?
Yeah, hi everyone. I know we came back to the same conversation from last week regarding the labeling and stuff, and I completely agree with Patrick regarding this. But going into the control and labeling, I would like to say actually who is in control to label us. I mean, let's say we'll be diagnosed and okay, we do the label, but let's say I'm not agree with that. I mean, okay, there is something wrong, but I'm not agree with the label which the doctor said prescribed to me. So I would like to go to the other doctor. The other doctor will give me the other label. So it's like, so I mean, there is like a control, but still you need to be aware of the doctor, the psychiatrist is still a normal people. He can choose wrongly, so you need to be in control still.
So there's a question of power as well as control. Oriana, I'm going to come to you in a second, but I think Tracy's about to duck out. So let's just get a final thought from you, Tracy, before you go. What's your final thought?
I think my final thought is I'm listening to people's own experiences, Roisin's and I've forgotten her name now, Barbara. Yeah. I'm actually finding this quite tricky because I have a situation in my family with my sister in Australia, having lost her children and living rough in a car. Now I'm being quite open there and telling some, divulging some information, but it leaves me thinking sort of about our responsibility for others and how much one can do to help other people directly. We might have to work on something strategically and in schemes and I don't know, I feel actually quite overcome with the ideas that I've been thinking about over the last couple of sessions I've joined with regard to people that I know, or as I say, quite intimately, like my sister. I haven't been left with any answers. There isn't any probably easy answers. So my parting shot is that I'm still thinking and don't know where I'll get to. I can't hear you, Mikey.
Does it kind of give you some sort of hope or some kind of idea about how a community can actually help a bit more than maybe they're doing now? Or does it make you feel like, oh, this is a bit of too tough a problem?
I don't think it's too tough a problem, but I think as Roisin was saying that if say you're having you know, not having any support for your mental health, and you're in a situation where you don't trust anybody at all, how can the people who could potentially help you help them, if you know what I mean? So it's just, yeah, and I suppose it's about the people around people who have a mental health problem, of being as informed as possible of the different sort of methodologies, and you know, because you can't deal with it as you might deal with it in the way that you would with someone who hasn't got a mental health problem, because you sort of, you know, as you get older, we learn different techniques to sort of support you. But if, you know, if we're not as versed or as informed or as educated about how to help the different parts of these friends or family that they become when they're having a tough time mentally, it's just, yeah. So I do feel daunted, Mikey. I think you're right, but I don't think it's impossible. But I think it just makes you realize how much work we all have to do. Sorry, Mikey, I can't hear you.
I keep turning myself down. It's something that, you know, Claire was talking about as well. And this question about ambition, you know, these are big problems and we've got to grapple with them. We've got to start somewhere. And I think, you know, definitely the approach of this group is to, like, let's just get on with it and do stuff and try things, and, you know, and try and get somewhere with this from a creative perspective, rather than from this kind of either medical or social perspective, but from a creative perspective. And I think that's the unique thing about this particular group, is we want to address these issues in a creative way. But thank you, Tracy. Ariana's had her hand up for a long time, so let's just go to her. What were you going to say?
I was
just saying thank you. Bye, guys.
Oh, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. I was just going to say it was about the labeling thing and, you know, the stakes of revealing stuff in different contexts. And I was just thinking, it just reminded me of, in my own work, I often reveal information about myself that maybe other people would judge negatively, but I do it as an alter ego. Right. And I'm not saying, obviously, you can't go through your whole life as an alter ego, but yeah, maybe the kind of thinking behind that is like, I can always just say, oh, that's my, you know, like that isn't really me, that's the alter ego. So maybe in real life, though, we could have a kind of sense of ourselves as being flexible and fluid and ever changing, and, you know, and that, yes, and in one circumstance, you might have, you know, revealed yourself to have, you know, some problem or some stigmatizing attribute, but then that's not your, you know, there's no true self that I'm authentically and stuck with for my entire life. And, you know, I'm constantly evolving and changing, and, you know, there's different facets of myself without completely compartmentalizing, you know, the pathologized parts, you know, but just sort of saying, I'm more than just that. So
in a way, it's about this expanded idea of self that can change, and you can once again come to this question of power and control, that you can have the power to actually be a different person here and there. Patrick, you've got your hand up. Hang on, let me unmute you. Hang on, go on.
There's something that Tracy said brought a very interesting. I mean, something in my head that, you know, the idea, she was saying something about how she's overwhelmed with what's happening to her relative in Australia. And I kind of had the sense that she almost didn't know how to respond to that situation, that she was overpowered with that. And it drew to my attention the fact how often people who are very close to us, our friends and family, are struggling to communicate with us. And I wanted to raise an issue of that stigma, that we look into the society, that the society is judging us, putting labels, and, like, you know, there's this big ghost of, like, this psycho, this crazy guy. And I know I'm terrible to talk to. I'm very, like, exhausting to talk to when I'm manic. But, like, before or after, I'm pretty much all right. And people still kind of struggle. They don't know how to approach it. They find it a little awkward, weird, strange. And I think this is something which maybe we could touch upon at some point as well. Like on the grassroots level, family, friends, and then move forward into society in a broader audience.
So begin with your like in a way they're the kind of experimental guinea pigs to
But
sort of start with. Yeah. So
and they
start with your friends. Yeah, yeah. Okay. I just want to, because there's a lot coming from Chelsea on the chat channel, but do you actually want to say anything? Just put this through on the verbal channel about what you're talking about, how this connects.
Okay.
Chelsea, hello, Chelsea.
Hello. Hi. I'll just say this, when we're talking about the whole labels thing, and we spoke about that on the last session, it reminded me of this show that I saw in Bristol at the Wardrobe Theatre, and it's what a guy that, I can't remember where he's from. Well, he's obviously got, you know, his parents are from, I can't remember where it is, but he was born in England, and people would often be like, where are you from, and label him. And I was just trying to say that in the his promo video, it says that I think they had his dad had a surname, but knew that if he put that surname on job roles, it would affect his job role. So they changed his surname, and because of that different label, it allowed him to get other jobs. I don't know, it just made me think about having labels, and does that therefore, you know, could that affect work just because you've got that label?
Yeah.
It just made me think about that, and also maybe just visually with the whole kind of visualizations happening. Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's quite a few people on this stream with some different surnames, we could say. Do they think that away from the mental health labels about the surname, does that actually change how people view you when they see a different surname? Have we got the power to change that surname? Because I guess in this case, in the case of this performance, that made a huge difference, and maybe that's also something we could play with. And would anybody be willing to play with it, with changing their surname or changing their name or changing any other elements of their label, just to see how that affects how people perceive them? Roisin, you got hang on a sec, Roisin, I'm going to come to, because Margot hasn't got the ability to raise a virtual hand because you're a co-host. No, you have, because you're in as Margot, haven't you? But now let me come to Roisin then. In that case, you can put your hand up, Margot, if you want to talk. Roisin, what's your point?
It's crazy quick, but Tracy recognized me from my last name, so I share it with my mom.
Right.
So I don't know her very well, but she knows my whole life.
Okay. So in a way, it's another label kind of question. So that's kind of interesting. So can we even control some of these labels? You can't really control like what your nose looks like, for example, in my case. And people make a lot of assumptions and judgments based on that nose. Anyway, what's your point, Margot? Go on.
Oh no, I'm not musical. Let's take this off. Apropos of like changing names and changing maybe not personality exactly, but
well, we're talking about
labels.
alter ego. I think is the or persona is what Oriana said, wasn't it?
Yeah, persona. And I think maybe Patrick, you made me think of it earlier when you said, you know, your community in the UK. You don't have a problem with like showing that you're part of it, yet in Poland, because of the way the gay community is perceived, maybe it's not easy as like, well, I'm part of this community, so back away everyone. And I think it's, you know, it's quite important to feel comfortable in either your ego or your alter ego. And to me, there is no differentiation. I mean, maybe there is a differentiation. No, there is no differentiation, because we're all just versions of ourselves from person to person. I'm not talking about, you know, from a diagnosis point of view, because I don't know that much about that. But I think certainly geographically moving to another country and then in a way making up my own personality or making up what I want to be in some respect, whilst learning in real time as well and discovering things about me and the world as I was growing up, was a very important thing. But what that causes sometimes is when I go back to people who really know me because they remember when I was 3 and I wasn't like that. you know, there's a sense of being like caught out. And I wonder whether there's something about the community, once you're part of community, be it defined by diagnosis or your sexual orientation or any kind of other association, do you then have to pledge allegiance to it for your entire life?
Right. So what
you
you're
owe
saying,
something to that diagnosis, for instance.
What you're saying is, in a way, moving to a different country allowed you to reinvent yourself, or moving to a different town or a different community.
Or figure out
what happens when you come back to where you are.
What I actually am. Maybe if I hadn't moved, I would have been just like a shabby version of myself, or not. I don't know.
Okay.
I think once you internalize certain values, like for example, the you know, being out and about. Like I'm out and about in my small town Poland, 10,000 people. It's probably like a block of flats here in London, and I don't have an issue with that. But that march that was going on there, and you know, in this slightly bigger place, which was filled with neo-Nazis and skinheads, I was genuinely worried about my health and my safety, so I didn't go. So it's like, I still think it can be quite conditional. Like, you know, wearing a mini skirt in the Middle East may not be as fabulous an idea as it is here in the summer for different reasons. I don't want to compare these issues. I don't want to sound like a plook, but we still live in a slightly conditional society. Even within England, there are certain places when situation is quite different than it is in London. It's more conservative, it's more this or that. I mean, it's a fact. No, everybody knows that. It's not only that Poland is, you know, crazy, etc., etc. So it's.
I mean, I guess the question is about context, and there's always a context. You can change your context, but you can't change that context that you're in. If you can move, you can do your bit to change it slowly, I suppose. Piotr, what's your point?
Yeah, I wanted to say the same thing. Like within different environment, like moving to different country or something, we can react differently to the same things. Like Patrick said, being in Poland, he can be feel anxious and stuff like that. So actually, to be honest, if for example, if I would be gay and I would live in Poland as well, I mean, not experience life in England, for example, and experience all the time the attacks from the society, from friends, I would feel depressed. I would feel anxious. I would don't know what to do. And then if I would like, for example, if I would go to England and got the experience from different perspective, like know different people, and I would know that okay, maybe it's not actually something wrong with me. Maybe, you know, maybe the place where I was living or when I was growing didn't accept what I am or who I am, and then, you know, so sometimes, I mean, I'm not the doctor. It's like just my thinking and my. I mean, I would like to say that sometimes the label could be wrong, and it depends of the environment where you are growing, and and sometimes the label, actually the problem which you have can disappear if you will change the environment.
Okay, so changing the environment, changing the context can actually make the problem disappear. But is it something that we're all able to do, especially these days, where we're kind of stuck in one place? I guess we can change the background, and I've been doing that and so has Rick been doing that over the course of this conversation. But that's a very limited kind of sense of being able to change things. I don't know. What do other people think? And how does this fit into our question of, you know, some kind of positive intervention into mental health? Got a point from Lucy.
Well, I was just thinking about the Deliveroo idea that someone brought up first time, because then you would be taking the work to somebody else's.
Yeah. Context. I mean, you could literally import the background in a way, couldn't you?
Yeah, you wouldn't be expecting them to change their environment or their context, the work would come to them, which could be problematic. I mean, if it was being delivered to someone who would rather be in a different place. But then that in itself is quite interesting. So then the work is perhaps bringing context with it. I don't know. Is that possible?
Yeah, I mean, it's like almost like a sort of context delivery kind of thing that we're talking about here. Could you actually, I mean, would it work? So I don't know what town you're referring to in Poland, but could you somehow deliver, almost like drop the bomb, deliver the context of like, you know, of a LGBT friendly context into I suppose that's what, in a way, that's what Gay Pride is doing. It's kind of like a context delivery, delivering a context. Would it work? In other places where people have felt uncomfortable in that context, could you deliver a different context and feel more comfortable? Margot.
I think about this delivering context. I think the delivery of context happens all the time, but I think we choose which delivery services to choose.
Yeah.
So it could be the Guardian delivery service, or it could be my cousin who's a priest delivery service.
Right.
And
so that's Catholic delivery of context.
But you know, the providers are many, and it's just about fighting out between them who's got the hegemony. And I think
the what?
Hegemony?
What,
we
what
also call it hegemony.
Yeah. What do you mean by that?
I mean, who provides the kind of overriding or the most relatable context that, or, you know, the context that most people choose to see the reality through.
So there's almost like a battle of context going on. It's not just like a quite simple question of, as we do here, where I've actually not got a bicycle full of art in the background. It's just superimposed. But it's not that easy. It's not that easy in real life. You've got people fighting to create this context behind you. So maybe it's not as easy as what we're doing here.
But I think artists absolutely have the power and ability to, you know, not to overthink certain things, but put something out there into the world in a form of a conversation or in a form of an artistic intervention to get people to think about things differently, not necessarily just provide a backdrop of a different context, because like you say, maybe it's not that easy.
This is a kind of very very quick fix version of something that could be a much bigger thing. So Patrick, what's your point? Hang on, I've muted you. Hang on.
Thank you. I'm going to mute.
Say again, Patrick.
Yeah, I have a question. I was wondering what sort of scale or a paradigm you were thinking of, more like a small independent project with which would be test driving the ideas and see how it works, or maybe tying up with pre-existing organizations like Mind and to use the facilities, the spaces, you know, and the outreach, the network that they already have, or maybe even, you know, tie up with a couple of MPs, get some, you know, humongous money and put it back on the NHS as a little, I don't know, like a part of the mental health system that already is out there. It's really terribly underfunded. So that was my question. Like,
what's the real output going to be for this? Is that what you're saying?
I mean, what do you think would be the best way to reach the most amount of people, really? Because I mean, it would be amazing to have a small, you know, like a,
let me turn that around, Patrick. What would you like to see? And then let's try and work from there.
Well, I kind of sneak in the answer there already. So like basically I thought to test drive it as a small organization for a year or two, see what are the best options, what's the most successful, what is most liked and has you know, like best ratings, let's just say, amongst the people who receive the help. And then based on that, write a bigger project, ask for more money, and then I think tying up with an already existing organization is a great idea, because they already have the network, they have the facilities, they have some therapies, they could be trained, they could be new people involved.
So in a way, what I'm picking up from you is that almost like a kind of laboratory for these ideas in some kind of pre-existing institution that's already works within the field of mental health and try these out in the small scale before we go bigger. Is that what you're saying?
I think that would be a brilliant idea, because
Okay,
I mean the idea in general, that the few things that you've mentioned at the beginning of the meeting are brilliant. I've never heard about it, and I think they're really ingenious. They're giving the outlet for patients. Well, not patients. I suppose that's not really the politically correct word.
Is there anything in particular that you think is like the best idea, or the one you would run with?
I like the audio tool. I think it's brilliant for both sides, because it gives one side to share the experience, and the other to, it's like asking someone what's the LSD trip, like how do you, it's quite difficult to describe, but apparently you can try, and like manic trip can be almost equally crazy, etc., etc. I really like the idea of going to visit people at home, people who maybe are depressed or just can't really get out of bed, and try to work with them on their premises, which can be quite tricky, but definitely doable, I imagine. I would love to receive such help in the days of need. I kind of like pretty much everything, or most of it.
Okay, well, we're still running with this. We've got one more session where we're going to try and refine this. But that's great feedback. Let me come to Roisin. What's your point?
I just wanted to ask about the legitimacy of reaching the most people, because everything always wants to reach the most people.
Yeah.
But I like this particular discussion because I randomly knew 4 people in it, which is insane because I thought I'd know 2.
Yeah.
But there's something quite nice about that. The bigger this gets, the less it benefits me personally. So I always find it kind of difficult. The things that make things important to me are the conversations I can continue and the personal touch within things. So as soon as you reach more and more people, how do you maintain that sense of identity within that? And how do you maintain feeling valued and included the more people that you reach?
Okay, so you've got to keep that sort of personal touch and that sense of, in a way, I'm going to call it intimacy, the intimacy of knowing people and being able to just expose what you've got to say. I mean, in a way, Lucy, were you going to say something there? Let me unmute you.
Do you know, I hadn't even raised my hand.
Yeah, but I could tell, I'm watching, by the way, everybody, I'm watching all of you on this grid. I'm looking for those little flickers of, I mean,
that's quite terrifying.
Emmett looks like he's asleep. But, you know, I'm looking for the opposite of that, really, like real kind of flickers of interest.
Yeah, I can't remember. Oh, yes, I was thinking about your point that you just made, Roisin, about the intimacy of the group. And one way maybe around that, if you wanted to get to people but keep that feeling, is to have a group that you work with, and then for a finite period, and then you move on to another group and you do it that way, so that you keep that intimacy, but you also try and keep reaching out to new people and bringing new people into the conversation. I don't know, but that's one solution to a problem that I've often come up against.
I mean, I like this idea of a kind of laboratory, but it's not a science or a medical or a psychological, but an art laboratory. I quite like that idea as a creative laboratory. I mean, in a way, that's my dream, but I don't, you know, this is not about me. Emmett, you're kind of, I've kind of accused you of being asleep just now. Have you got anything you want to say, add to this, or are you just listening at this point?
Basically, I was late joining it, and then there was other things. I was trying to get Ron and Rosie along, and then there's ages talking to them. And then there's these other things that came up while I was doing that, and I was just looking at those. I was actually flicking through other things. So you could see me looking at my phone. I was looking at other things.
Okay, so you weren't even really paying attention.
I had talkie-okie volume on, but I was not the picture at the time. So mental health, I mean, did you plan these before the whole lockdown thing happened?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, obviously the plan has changed a little bit, and we're still grappling with the technology right now. But
because I'm reminded of a story that used to be told about Poland in 1980 when the whole solidarity thing kicked off, and it was the beginning of the end of the whole Warsaw Pact kind of thing. And all the people apparently who had been in psychiatric treatment because they were ill all started getting well. But all the people who had been running everything, all the Communist Party apparatchiks, they all started getting ill.
Right.
And I'm wondering if that might be what's happening at the moment with the whole lockdown thing. A lot of the people who were finding things really tough before in what was called normality, those people are actually, they could see the whole system was broken. So now everyone can see it's broken. They actually feel a lot more normal.
Right. Okay.
And
So
all the people who had a lot invested in that broken system, those are the people who are going crazy at the moment because they've lost all that power that they had.
Yeah, people like me.
Well,
yeah. Anyway, no, I'm just joking.
Not
But
exactly,
yeah,
I mean, I think you're a man of. You're definitely using the Zoom better than anyone else I've seen do it. The way it automatically changes who's on screen and stuff. No one else seems to know how to do that.
Anyway, I guess what we're talking about, I mean, we touched on this a little earlier on, is this idea of the new normal. You're getting a thumbs up from, is that a thumbs up from Oriana? And I can see a few people are kind of clapping that one as well. Like, I mean, we touched on this before, the new normal, and where will that new normal go? It's a question, I suppose, when we talk about normal, we're also really talking about context, because normal is kind of defining what the context is. I don't know if you were there for that part of the discussion, Emmett, when we were saying, actually, a lot of these labels, a lot of these discussions really depend on the context. And, you know, you can go, you know, something in London, something in a small little town will be a completely different discussion just because of the context. But there's also this question about what is considered normal, what's not considered normal. That in a way is a different way of talking about context, I would say. But our context has radically shifted. Our normal has radically shifted. Could we actually define a new normality that in a way maximizes the number of people that feel comfortable and happy and themselves? Could we actually do that now that we've got this respite from the previous normality?
The thing is that what we're doing at the moment is probably short term, because I don't think it's sustainable in the long term for us all to be atomized and not have any human contact. I think human contact is very important to people. A lot of people are even depriving themselves of sunshine at the moment, and that is vital importance. And but in terms of a new normal, it has to be sustainable. And what we were doing for the 40 years of neoliberalism was not sustainable. They're flying everywhere, they're exponential increase in fossil fuel exploitation and stuff. None of that is sustainable.
I mean, what about the question of mental health? So a sustainable society for people mentally?
Well, one thing that's happened now is all these local neighborhood groups, mutual aid groups, to help people who have either because they're in a high risk group or because they've got symptoms, and there are other people going to the shop and getting them from them. So people are getting to know their neighbors in a way. It's maybe normal in a village, but in London it hasn't been normal. Because people move a lot. People don't tend to know who their neighbors very well.
So there is this kind of community reconnection that's happening that's possibly a healthy sign. Let me put this out to everybody. What could we define a better normal, a more positive, productive normal? Rasheen is shaking her head. Patrick's looking a bit more enthusiastic about it. Anybody else think that this could be an insight into how we redefine things? I will also say we're into our kind of last quarter of this session, so let's also think about this question of, in terms of a creative intervention, what is this going to look like? We talked a lot about context. We've talked a lot about kind of the power and the control to actually wield these labels in a positive and productive way, to be able to actually, you know, where that power lies. Could we somehow control the context? And in a way, that question of the new normal, I think, is a related question. So, I mean, what are people thinking about this? Is it inspiring them? What could we do to create a better normal? Is that too tough a question? I feel like it is, because everyone's just looking at me blankly. Margot. My unmute's not working. Oh, yeah. Oh, no. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, Oriana, universal basic income. Yeah, and I think in order to make what's happening now more sustainable and us not reverting back to how things were, is vital. But it's a big job. It's like this 50-year-long project, or even longer, and it's tackling things on a bigger scale. So then we individually can feel the benefits of it.
Yeah.
But that doesn't cancel out small forums of people getting together and chatting, because I totally get what Roisin was saying earlier about, there's this obsession of like reaching as many people as possible. And I also struggle with that, because sometimes, I don't know, it's just like, whatever the expression, I don't even know what the expression is. But people just standing there kind of like blankly, not really being with it, and then not understanding what you're trying to communicate, versus smaller group of people who are really on the same page. They're the ones who can make a difference. But then there is some kind of power in numbers. But I think we need to change the legislation somehow. I said in the last meeting we should have like a 4-day working week and stuff like that.
Right.
But it's massive to implement that. And is it an art thing, or is it a legislation thing? I don't know. Maybe it's both. And who?
I mean, how many days a week have you been working?
Me?
Yeah.
At the moment, I'm working. Oh no, this is my first week when I'm just working for myself or resting. And already Monday was taken away by Easter. So I think I'll be working still 4 or 5 days a week.
Okay. I mean, because I think now
but I'm going to take it at my pace, so hopefully
so
I'll be
it's
in
not
charge
necessarily
of when
about
to
the
take a
number
break.
of days per week, but about the pace of working.
Yeah, maybe that's a
possibly.
better way of phrasing it.
Roisin?
Yeah, I was going to say, obviously, aside from all the dead people and the not being able to go outside, there are actually many things I like about this situation. Like we've realized everyone can work from home, or at least a lot of people can work from home. You can work at the hours you choose. The underground is way super crucial, and we now know that. And it's actually quite like how clearly society is seeing what is now important. You can't deny how important things are now. And you can see that people will still continue to work when they are at home. People don't take the piss as much as it was suggested they would. So there are many things to be taken from this experience, I think.
Okay, so we're getting a lot of insights here. Chelsea?
Hiya. I was just thinking of something that I'd read from when you were saying about kind of all this change, like obviously what's happening at the moment with COVID-19. And it's by a guy called Steve Ali. He's a Syrian refugee, and he wrote a few days ago on GQ saying, which I know just really resonated, being like, the coronavirus has made us all refugees of a sort in our own homes, with no idea when, if at all, our old lives will return, but we're adapting. And there's another bit that I really like saying, you're new to the refugee game, so let me give you some advice. You can't plan for the future. You can't guess how long it will be. So don't. Plan for today, shop for the week, have goals for the month. Pause your long-term ambitions and work on small achievements you can control. You've lost control over the future, but COVID-19 has proved you never really had it. This is a great time to learn to enjoy what you can right now and do what you can with what you have today, because that's all that's certain. Small moments of connection and laughter are the best things you'll ever have. You've probably forgotten that in your quest for greatness and future hypothetical happiness. I just really liked that. I thought it was
So there's
really lovely.
Yeah, this question of like going back to the moment. I mean, earlier on at the very beginning, we were talking about how long is that moment. But certainly, I mean, everyone agrees there's a kind of readjustment. Okay, so we're talking about defining a new context, we're talking about less work, or once again, I think, Roisin, for you, it's more about the control of how you work rather than having less time to work and doing more stuff in a shorter period of time. It's more about that question of controlling how you actually do it. We've got, you're back again, Oriana. So, I mean, I guess this is a question about how we actually turn this into something that we can positively do in this short space of time. As Chelsea said, where things are changing. We don't really know what's going on. Patrick, what's your point? Hang on, let me just unmute you. Yeah, go on.
It's just something that kind of keeps on coming to my head is that we keep on talking about labels and stuff, but I just want to make sure that we all remember that mental health issues, diagnosis, these are not just like little things like labels, you know, which we see in the store, or we just, someone is funny, happy, jolly. And I'm talking from my own experience, and I know for a fact the gravity of what can possibly happen in one's head when, you know, when I, for example, myself, when I have my manic episode, things are just kind of exploding. It's crazy. And it can really lead to some dark places and dangerous places. I can endanger myself. I can endanger people who are around me, unless I'm locked up in a hospital when I'm, you know, safe and sound. So I think my issue is not exactly with labels as such. I don't have an issue with a diagnosis. The issue, I think, from my perspective, is the stigma around it. And maybe we could focus a little bit more about the idea of a stigma around the diagnosis and mental health issues and the exposure and the understanding, rather than, I think adding more labels, it's not a good idea. It reminds me of Gombrowicz, and that's a really dark place. That's actually, that's all I wanted to say to
I mean, have you got any ideas about how to remove stigma or how to?
Exposure is one thing for sure. I mean, letting people, like talking to people, I mean, being open about it within a possible context. So I never had an issue with sharing my diagnosis with friends, and even people who are interested. Sometimes it just pops up in a conversation because it's a part of me. I'm Patrick, I'm from Poland, I'm gay, I'm bipolar, I'm tall, I'm super hot, etc., etc. So like, it's like a part of me. It became a part of me, and I just embraced it, and it's fine. And it wasn't always so easy, but with time, it kind of became well, that's my normal now. And so maybe that is my new normal, but it's just me. It's still me. Yeah.
I mean, I guess if you're super hot, you could just open a window there, Patrick. But anyway, where are we going to go with this conversation? We're talking about reducing the stigma. Is it just about conversation? Is it actually just about like getting these things out there, having a discussion? Oriana, what's your point?
I just wanted to draw attention to something Lucy said in the chat, which was the monetary worth of care in the community and family, because I know people go on about, oh, I've got so much more time. These people must not have children. That's all I can think, is that if you have children, like for me, I now have no time because I have my children. Like it's a luxury to be here with you, but this is probably the only thing I'm going to do.
What have you done with the kids?
So yeah, I mean, I don't know what this links, how this links exactly with mental health, but maybe, I don't know, maybe Lucy can say something more about why she wrote that in response.
Okay, so you know, I guess we're so used to speaking from our own perspective and not seeing those other perspectives. You know, I don't have kids, so you know, I've got a lot of friends who do, and it's a completely different ball game, let's say. Lucy, was there a point from you?
Well, yeah, I think it's all connected because it's way beyond having kids. I mean, you know, as you can see, hopefully you don't think this is my idea of, you know, the best decor choice. I have kids and I know what you mean, but I think it is more than that. I think it's, I think that we're being held up by so many people doing so much work all the time, looking after two parents, which means they can't, you know, work in the way that they might have done, or I mean, just, you know, we all know 101 different cases of that kind of thing, and the government really bleeds those people dry, I would argue. And I think if that isn't given some worth, then it says a lot about our moral integrity as a society, and also about our structure. And I think you lose in a way, it's almost like we're being held up by pillars that we don't respect. We don't see how important they are to us. And
yeah. So I guess the spotlight's changed and some of these things have come into more of a view than they were before.
Some have, but there's
some
also
have,
a
some
lot more
haven't.
leaning.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the NHS asking for so many volunteers, which is amazing, but equally, why is the NHS needing some, you know, I mean, where does the money come into it? Or if it's not going to be money, where's the other way of showing people that
the value,
that they're of worth?
Okay, I mean, will the money tap or the money tree stop being shaken after we come out of lockdown? Can you turn off a money tap that you've turned on? If we were going to divert the flow, where would we divert it? Is money the same as valuing something? Like, is the way to value child rearing to throw money at it? Is it or looking after older people? These are some of the questions. We've only got like 15 minutes left now, but I think we should just get to the money question. You know, I think it's a big question here. And it, you know, also comes to the point of like, if we do come up with an idea, how are we going to actually get money for it? Because we probably will need money for it. So that's another question too. But what about the question of money? Anyone want to sort of come back on that question? Money? Yep. Margot?
I think what I'm kind of thinking about increasingly about is it possible to stop relying on big conglomerates or big employers for employment, because they can give you money and they can give you regular money, but they can't make the meaning of life to you. They can't produce your own way of doing things. It's impossible. If you work for an organization, a company, you have to do things in a certain way. So I wonder whether we could just need less money. Could we do with less money and less luxury? And B, by simplifying our needs, can we then just make our own money by doing like simple stuff, like growing stuff, selling it, or doing things on the local level?
Could we drop out of the kind of corporate money system? Could we live on less money? Could we do more informal things, let's say, to make money? Would that be helpful, just to drop out of the whole money system? Do we need it anymore? I'm surprised you're silent on this, Emmett, because you've normally got a lot to say about money.
Well, I'm very happy to say something. I mean, I spoke today. I think what we've had is, for the last 40 years, really from 15th of December 1976 in the UK, which is when basically the country was sold down the river to the IMF. And since then, we haven't really had, we've seen a huge transfer of wealth from wage earners to capital. And this got extreme the last 10 years when we basically had 0% interest rates, which means for those people who can borrow money pretty much for free, and then they can then using it to speculate in the London property market. It's completely distorted property in London and actually the rest of the country. Has distorted share prices, has distorted everything. The fact they're not actually having to pay anything to get that money. And it basically means we've had this enormous transfer of money from regular people to the super rich. Now, if we did the citizens' income in the right way, we could undo all of that within a generation.
Okay.
All we need to do is all existing tax legislation and just say that everyone pays the same rate of tax, 50%. So for every bit you earn, one goes for you personally and one goes for the common pot for everyone. That's the same if you're an individual, if you're a corporation, if you're whatever. The difference is that individuals get universal basic income and corporations won't.
I mean, what about this question of like dropping out of the money system, where you just spend less earn less and are just not part of it, apart from maybe growing some food or something. This is what Margot proposed. Would
Well,
it work?
in this country, we have a basic anarchic system, which is if you don't use, you get taxed on using money, not on anything else. It's only when you attach a monetary value to something you have to pay tax.
Right.
If you have an anarchic community where everyone gives each other things freely, there's nothing to tax. If you give your friend a haircut, the state doesn't get involved. They don't tax it. It's only if you charge them money.
Well, I've seen some pretty criminal haircuts myself. Anyway, let's.
The system is pretty anarchic. The pudding bowl haircut is coming back now. People have to do it themselves. Get a pudding bowl on.
I might be doing my own haircut a bit later on, actually, because I've got obviously self-isolating, and that might raise the attentions of the authorities if it goes wrong.
If you charge yourself, only if you charge yourself, they'll want to cut.
Yeah. Okay. Right. I'm going to mute you there, Emmett. Oriana.
I just was going to say just about the whole money and care work, and I personally find that like anything I'm really interested in, there's no money attached to it. Like
right.
But what brings me down is not the fact that I don't earn very much money, it's the fact that that means what I do is less valued. Like, and so if there's a way of valuing things,
yeah,
you know, I'm not saying it'd be great, obviously, if there was a wage for, you know, being a parent or whatever. I mean, obviously there's child benefit and stuff. I don't receive that for whatever reason. But, you know, it's not really much anyway. But yeah, I just feel like if society valued these things, it would make me feel a lot better.
Is there a way to do it without using money? Could we value people in a different way?
That's what I'm.
Yeah, I mean, it's a kind of question back. Oh, we lost Lucy. I wanted to get her final thought from her, but maybe I don't know, we can bring her back in. Anyone?
Something on the chat as a final.
Yeah, I know there was a final thought on the chat, wasn't there? Which is something about the haircut.
Lucy said,
yeah,
I think distortion is a very good thing to bring up. I think I would like whatever output this might become to be transparent and easy to weigh in terms of give and take by all. Good luck with the haircut, Mikey.
I didn't really get what she was going on. She's talking about all the sound distortion we had earlier on, or she's talking about distortion of the ideas. I'm not sure, but anyway, we'll never know because she's gone now. So we'll have to wait for the next session, which is in 2 weeks' time, where we're going to be finally coming up with this proposal. Patrick, what's your thought? Hang on.
It's almost a little sad, but you know, I keep on thinking that if you think about the darkest sector of the national health in every country, the darkest hospital you wouldn't want to be if you were if you had a choice. It's a psychiatric hospital everywhere. Poland, Russia, England, you know, United States, probably everywhere. And I think it's a very important idea how we as a society perceive mental health as such in general. And I think that's something which really has to be addressed and maybe could be a part of this conversation, you know, next time, if it really is an issue or it's not, because I think it's actually quite, you know, even it's actually translated into the fact that it's underfunded as well. The cuts have been tremendous in the last few years for the mental health institutions here in the UK, for example. So I think that the whole idea of perceiving the entire world of mental health is something that needs to be addressed and looked into quite carefully. Thank you.
Okay. Roisin?
Hello. Yeah, I just want to say two quick things and then like ask a question of everyone.
Okay, go on.
So essentially, one, money does make a massive difference. The vast majority of my mental problems went away when I got a job that paid me okay. So I do think we need to consider people's finances and their independence as huge things. Like, it will make a lot of things a hell of a lot easier. The other thing I wanted to ask is if people are discussing their mental issues with others, how do they ensure those other people are capable to listen and I guess, be unaffected by your problems at that point. Because
Okay.
I have like a friend that will always ask me how I am before she tells me her whole stream of issues, which is actually kind of nice. If I've had a shitty day, she might wait a day, which is actually a big deal for her and a big deal for me, I think. But if she really needs help, it's got to be then. So I'd like to know, yeah.
So what is this, more experience in listening and understanding? Is that what you mean?
I guess just, I wouldn't want something I shared with someone to then upset them.
Right.
So how, when people are sharing, do they ensure that the other people are in a position to help, or at least just hear you without it upsetting them, I guess?
Okay. So how do you share without upsetting those people? Patrick, was that a response to this question? No, or I just, oh, hang on. Or I just not lowered your hand from before?
I think it's good to like let it out and just let it fly. I mean, it's better to say a little bit and try to make a little difference than not to say nothing at all, I think.
Yeah. So in a way, you've got to try things out. You might occasionally upset somebody, but it's worth giving it a go. It's worth practicing, I suppose.
Oh, no, not even about upset. Why would they get upset? They may get a little frazzled or embarrassed, or just like wouldn't want to hear about it because it's too much to.
But like, I might have put too much pressure on them. Like suddenly they have all of my problems as well as all of theirs. Not they'd be upset by them, just that they'd feel pressured.
But it's a part of you. Why not to share it? It's a part of you. I think if they're friends and if they like you or love you, they'll definitely handle it.
Okay, they can handle it, says Patrick. Okay, we're sort of spiraling into those final thoughts. I also want to point out, you know, we've got to somehow come up with some kind of proposal in the next session. So it's time to get final thoughts. Also, those people that are listening but have not got their cameras on, it'd be great if you could come back for a final thought. Like you, Claire, for example, if you can. Come back for a final thought. But where are people going to, let's get a final thought from everybody. Where are people going to take this? Have they taken anything from this session? Chelsea, is that a hand up there? Yeah.
So hello, sorry, my internet went funny there. I was just going to say, I've got to go, but I was going to say that from before, I really like the National Arts Service and the Deliveroo idea. And then I watched something recently that I've shared on here called Step Inside the Circle, which is by a lady that it's part of the Compassion Prison Project. But I feel like it could be, you know, happen anywhere or kind of adapted. But it's where you can, you know, you could get a load of people in a circle and you kind of say something that, you know, something that might have affected everyone, and then if it relates to you, stepping inside the circle, you get closer and closer together, and you realize that you're not alone. It's quite interactive. You realize that other people are, you know, going through exactly the same as you are in some way or the other. And it was just a cool video to watch, and I thought that maybe, obviously now with what's going on, you probably couldn't create something physically like that. But is there something you could do? Is there something interactive like that?
Yeah.
Virtually that you could do?
No, I would love there to be, because my big issue, and we've been grappling with it, and we're struggling to sort of do something to make it happen. We always get stuck with other problems, but I'd love to be able to rearrange you all in a circle so that you could actually, you know, see each other and have a more kind of I hate this kind of grid thing. I feel like it's really alienating of people, and I want to actually get people more, you know, physically interactive, even if they are online. So to me, that idea of making that virtual physical circle would, I think, would be a really great thing to try and work on.
Yeah, and I'll just say, if you have a chance to watch that, it's amazing, and then
have
you
understand.
understand.
Posted it in the chat? Have you posted
Yeah,
it
it's above. Yeah,
okay,
I have.
Cool.
And it's called Step Inside the Circle. It's 6 minutes, and it is amazing.
Okay, we'll have a look at that for sure.
Well, see you next time.
See you later.
Thank you. Bye.
Final thoughts.
Bye.
Let's get some final thoughts. Anyone want to go next on a final thought? Claire, you've just come back into it. Are you ready for your final thought, or do you want to hang on in there for a minute?
I don't really have one. I just enjoyed listening to everyone. Pretty much agree with everything everyone said. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, it's not often you can agree with everybody all the time, but this is the way
I
we like
know.
to do Tokyoki. Final thought? Anyone else? Final thought? Emmett, final thought?
Yeah, I just think there's a book by Voltaire called Candide, and the last sentence of Candide is everyone should tend to their own garden. Now, not everyone has an actual physical garden, but if you think of your garden as your space that you have control over, that is sort of your private space, if everyone takes care of that, their own bit, then maybe collectively we'll live in a more beautiful place.
Okay, so take care of your own garden. What do people think about that? Let's get some other final thoughts. Jill, have you got a final thought?
I love that idea of the National Art Service and the delivery and the ward artist. And I think
artist?
The ward artist.
Okay, the artist on the ward.
Artist on the ward. Yeah.
Well, no, it was in the ward, not on the ward.
No, in the ward.
In the local, the resident ward artist. Yes.
Ward artist. Yeah.
Ward in the sense of a local area.
Yeah, and I think it's all
we're getting that from Oriana.
Yeah, it's all down to funding.
Yeah.
And that's something we'll have to attempt in the near future.
Okay. Do you
Thanks
think we
a
can
lot.
find the money from somewhere?
Yeah, we can.
Would you mind paying a lot more tax for these kind of things?
Well, I think it's too, as I say on the telly, it's too soon to discuss anything like that.
Okay. Let's get some final thoughts. Any other final thoughts? Oriana, have you got a final thought?
Yes, this tend to your own garden thing. It sounds very individualist to me. Like if the billionaires tend their own gardeners in their own gardens, then we're in trouble.
This was the guy on the last Tokyoki that said each according to their needs to each according to their abilities. And this week he's saying tend to your own garden. So it's a bit of a change from Emmett.
I know he means it in the best possible sense. And I'm not anti and self-care or anything like that. I don't know if I have a real final thought.
Anything, I mean, just help us out here because we've got to come up with some, we can see that you've actually have got a child behind you poking up there. Anything, give us something to go on. What should we be working on for next week for this final session? What should our big idea be that we run with, that we put in the big proposal to all the big funders to get some money for?
Well, I already said last week that I thought you need a list of what already exists. And then I guess it's like, maybe it's because I've done a PhD, so I know it's like you do the literature review and then you find out where your contribution is. So it's like, well, what already exists and what different thing are we going to be bringing? And I don't, somebody said, I think it was Patrick said something about, what's the most popular, what helps the most people, and I don't know if I agree that it has to be popular.
I don't think Patrick was actually saying that. I think he was kind of saying that that's one way of looking at things, but I think he was also questioning that approach as well.
It was about having a committee and testing out ideas and
having more of a kind of laboratory, really, more than seeing what's more effective. I think. Let's get some other final thoughts. Roisin, Patrick, Margot, final thoughts?
Yeah, my final thought is that I like the idea of the universal income because I think there'll be a broad action that touches many people and it will give people possibility of going out and using the National Art Service or whatever like this. I
mean, what about the question of this kind of like
to really, universal basic income for everybody, so that we can go away and enjoy the moments of of laughter and really appreciate where we are at right now, like in Chelsea's quote. And the unicorn as well, obviously. So.
But I mean, what about the question of a creative intervention? That's what I'm saying. How can we turn this idea that I think everyone in this session and the last session and the different session we did with Norwood Library, all agreed that they love this universal basic income. But how do we turn this into a creative intervention that us as creative people actually put forward something to move that idea along?
I think it will be like some kind of creative marketing campaign.
So it could be a campaign, basically. It could be a campaign. That's what you're saying. You could turn that into a campaign.
With stickers and Facebook posts.
Right.
Oh,
Okay.
joking.
Turn it into a campaign. Right.
No, but
no,
yeah.
you don't like that. Okay, retract that. Okay. I'm going to leave it there. If you think of something, come back. But Rasheen's got a hand up. You haven't had your final thought yet.
No, I was just going to second Oriana. If there's stuff going on, why can't we look at it, find it, let people know about that, I guess? Because it's one thing to come up with an idea, but you're right, we should see everything that's currently going on and see if we can support something or find something that is similar to our values.
I mean, we're definitely going to do the research, aren't we, Margot, for the next final session? We will do the research. We will find out what's going on, what's happening, and try and fit our ideas in once again into the wider context of what's already happening. What's the name of the unicorn to your right, Oriana? No name. No name.
No, she said it. Go on, say it again.
Alana.
Okay. Welcome. We're just closing now, but maybe join in next time.
Oh, actually, one other thing I wanted to say.
Yeah.
Can I say it? Is it too much?
Yeah. Yep.
It was just about this workshop I did with Tanya Bruguera, the Cuban artist, and at the Hayward a few years ago when they had the summer school. It was like artists came and did workshops. Anyway, she did one which is about creating a profession, a new profession. And everybody in that workshop thought we should come up with a campaign, you know, of some kind. But she was saying how, you know, let's give more value to the proletariat. Let's come up with an actual job that someone can actually do. So I feel like I'm weighing more toward, I would lean more towards, you know,
I would say all props to Tanya Bruguera there, because absolutely, I mean, let's do something. Let's actually make it happen.
Yeah. Let's create a job, you know?
Yeah, exactly. It could be National Artist Delivery Service Deliverer. I don't know. Patrick, final thought. Let me unmute you. Hang on.
But I can ride a bicycle. That's it.
Yeah. So you could be the first volunteer. You could be the artist number one.
I can deliver the artist.
Like random hot guy.
Safely to its destination. Yes.
Okay.
Love yas.
Okay, there we go. Some great visuals there. Maybe before we go, we should just quickly take a check on the visuals. Rick, have we got any visuals to throw in? Rick's struggling with the visuals. Any visuals from Penny? There's something going on here. Can we share? Can we share it?
Yeah, you can take the screen, or I can just, because everything was just saved hastily. But Penny was basically doing visualizations as the conversation went on. So let me just see if I can share those with you. Sorry.
Who is that bearded guy?
This guy, Emmett, you're talking about?
Oh, no, sorry. No, the guy, Ricardo.
Oh, that's Rick. That's Rick doing the visuals.
Oh,
okay,
I see.
But I think, is there any visuals coming up? Okay, so we are going to get some visuals from Rick. That's good. Okay, so can we explain this a little bit? What is this, Margot?
Yeah. So this was about Tracy finding her diaries and trying to make sense out of, you know, the experience.
Love it.
Of the lady.
Yeah.
Then we've got. Can you see this one?
The same.
Has it changed?
No.
Is it the same?
Same again. Flick through again.
Okay, this one. I think, Penny, do you want to come and help me interpret the images quickly? My friend's like, no.
All right, I'm going to.
So this is
yeah.
about having control and putting meaning on stuff and putting things,
Oh,
you
that's
know,
right,
the
yes.
labels, and yeah, helping us regain control. Then we've got. I'm just going to pick a random one.
That was the shining the light. This is a very literal one.
Shining the light on the labels.
Sometimes being useful. So it's got a little bow around the.
Can people hear?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. And then next one.
That was hegemony. And the artist challenging
the big word.
The big word, hegemony. We never really found out what it meant, but anyway.
Okay.
Dismantling the system.
So that was the dismantling of system.
And the artist's capacity to challenge, really.
And this one?
This is all the different versions of oneself, I think.
Yep.
We're talking about alter egos and.
Love it.
And that we might have.
We've got the elephant in the room finally.
All different things, but ourselves.
And we've got the elephant in the room. Yes.
Yeah.
I was looking at the Barbie. Sorry.
This was about struggling to be oneself with one's issues, and then defining an alter ego. So it's kind of looking. It was basically the sheep being the alter ego of the.
Tangled fish.
The fish being entangled, yeah.
And then me, you, us.
That was about another one about labels, really.
Okay, and I'm just going.
Because it's something that seems to keep cropping up about whether they're useful or not, and in different contexts.
And then I'm going to pick this one.
Yeah, it's great because like it's like the labels is like
refugees and being isolated. There's a conversation that was about at home and about being isolated at the same time. So they kind of ran into each other really.
So almost like the island of the home.
Next one was about making connections between people, which was the fiction. Yeah, about laughter and connections between different cultures and different people. So that was that.
And this one?
That was the connection one.
Oh, that's the connection.
Between the different people, yeah.
Between the shark and the sheep.
And then this one was about you talking about communities and localization. And then somebody started talking about circles and stepping into about a film about stepping into circles or something. Yeah, so I just that came from that, interlinking local communities.
And we've got maybe a little bit about looking after your own garden as well.
Growing out of one of them.
Yes, and looking after your own garden, Mikey says, because somebody referenced Candide and how everybody should just focus on their own garden and the world will be a better place.
There you go.
Thank you so much, Paddy. These are so brilliant. A very different medium.
Okay, yeah.
Sharing the screen.
We're just doing the final. Rick, have we got some visualizations coming from you? We're going to quickly look at Rick. Maybe we can quickly get in Oriana's point because you've got your hand up again. Is it a no? Is that from before? Okay. Okay. Let's have a quick look at Rick's visuals that we didn't have a chance to get in. So what have we got here? Let's have a look. That's the other guy with the beard. This is about what we started off about, in a way, ambition. And
yes,
maybe it also relates to having the kids at home as well, repainting the bedroom. Yeah. Be ambitious with what you can get the kids to do. Okay, let's just flick through. This is about this question I think that Barbara mentioned about justice and control and power. And once again, it's the kids. It's a different view of the kids. This time, it's a more draconian homeschooling method. Let's move on. This is about do we make the judgment on the labels and not the person? And then we've also got a judge banging the gavel, struggling to keep control, which is probably a bit like this session as well. Let's move through. This is about
living in a bubble.
The Zoob. This is somebody in a Zoob ball. Are we all going to end up in Zoom balls going around the place? And what is that going to do for the People Speaks business model more than anything else? Or are we isolating ourselves? I think this is more of a question I think that Rick was on there. Any more, Rick? There's one that he's just working on, so I'm just going to sort of fill in a little bit. Any response to these questions? Any thoughts before we get the final visual? Or is it? Oh, this is the last one actually. So this is about the local artists for local people. Make of that what you will. We're certainly running out of Aberfeldy Street being the local artist for the
Why?
local.
Why?
So I mean, is that what they had in mind with the ward artists, the local artists for local people?
Now I understand better what you're up to. Yeah.
Okay,
so
but
that's
anyway,
Margot and you.
So that's what Rick's been doing the visuals all along. Any final comments, or is it just a wave goodbye and we'll see you in 2 weeks' time? We are going to have a look at our Facebook page because we are we doing a session on Friday for Norwood Library? Do we know? We don't even know. Are we doing it the following? I don't know. Are we doing it the following Friday? This Friday? We don't know what we're doing when we're doing it, but we're doing another session. So look out on our Facebook page when we're actually doing these sessions. In the meantime, thanks for everyone's contributions. We're going to do a bit of research and come up with some semi-formed proposals for next week to help. And you guys are hopefully going to turn them into real proposals. Thanks, everyone, and goodbye. Thank you for taking part.
Thank you.
Thanks to everyone that's been on the stream. If you're watching on Facebook, don't forget to do all the things like us and actually
Can we share the chat in any
discussion.
way?
Contribute to the chat. What's
Yes.
Can we share the chat? Yeah.
Is that, okay, round of applause. Yeah. See you next week.
So yes, we can share the chat, we can share the notes, but I'm not going to share them publicly. So if you do want them, let me know. So Roshina can send you the notes from all the sessions so far, even if you want. And that includes some bits of chat, but arbitrarily picked.